Again, happy Easter. We celebrate this magnificent Easter season, and it is easy to get into the mood of spring on such a beautiful day. We give God thanks for the beauty of creation. You might have, for those of you following along in the book, you might have noticed that I went beyond the text in the book and chose to read the longer version of the gospel. I don't usually choose that option. I did here for a couple of reasons. One is the exchange between Peter and Jesus is so important and so rich. This was the gospel that was both proclaimed at the funeral mass of John Paul II and recently at the funeral mass of Pope Francis. It also happened to be the gospel that our classmates chose for our ordination mass in 2002. There's so much here, and it applies to all of us, that beautiful exchange between Peter and Jesus, and the truth that God never gives up on us. God is always waiting with mercy. This is the story and truth of the prodigal son. This is the message that Pope Francis brought to the world in his 12-year papacy. Friends, so a compelling post-resurrection story, as I said. Jesus appears. I love the resurrection stories because Jesus is there. He's kind of playing coy. They don't always recognize him, and yet he is doing things that remind us of the Eucharist and remind them of his teaching, that they must also follow in faith, suffer, and give their lives. And so much is here. The fish and the bread, what does that recall? I probably shouldn't do this at the 9:30. The interactive, we're on tape here. Somebody will write to the chancery and say, Father's giving an interactive homily. That's all right, we'll go with it. What does it recall? The fish and the bread. Say it. Like we're at a Baptist church, say it. The Eucharist, right? The multiplication of the loaves. So there's clear Eucharistic elements here in the gospel today. And then he takes it and he gives it to them. And the beautiful exchange between Peter and Jesus. There is a splendid reflection from Pope Benedict XVI. From his time giving the Wednesday audiences, he did a section on the apostles, spiritual reflections. And with regard to Peter, he centered on this text. And it's brilliant, as Pope Benedict XVI was in his teaching. And he talks about the fact that Peter is answering, yes, I love you, and the Greek is a filial love, which is of course important. That's the love we have with family and friends. But Jesus is calling him to an agape type of love in the Greek, which means self-sacrificing. It's the love poured out on the cross. And then Peter responds again, not quite understanding what he's being called to. Now, at first blush, this may seem like Peter's being shamed. Not at all. Jesus is inviting him into restoration, right? That threefold denial being reversed with a threefold profession of love. And again, do you love me? Feed my sheep, feed my lambs, sacrifice yourself. And he foreshadows ultimately Peter's crucifixion upside down, because Peter didn't want to be crucified in the same manner as his Lord. So beautiful, friends, in terms of that message, that we too are called to pour forth our lives. And also, right, as I said during Holy Week, no sin is beyond God's mercy. Jesus never gives up on us. He is always there waiting for us to come back. One of the things that is really striking about the figure of St. Peter is how imperfect he is, right? Sometimes he gets it right, sometimes he gets it wrong. You can tell that he really loves the Lord. He is zealous. He jumps into the sea when John confirms that it is the Lord. But oftentimes he's mistaken. The fact that the church, guided by the Holy Spirit, really, or God, would put forth this image of Peter as important and loving and faithful, but imperfect. And of course, all of the popes of our tradition have experienced that. And no doubt that they called on the intercession of St. Peter in their ministry as Pope. The papacy is a gift. It is instituted by Christ for the service of charity and the service of unity of faith. The Pope has to be a good teacher, a teacher of faith and a teacher of the moral life. It is striking, as we said, that despite their imperfections as men, the Lord guides the church and guides them in the office. One of the things, as we reflected on the life and ministry of Pope Francis, is what his sister said. So, and you can imagine, if you were Archbishop of a major metropolitan area, as he was in Buenos Aires, that you would have seen everything come across your desk. And if you see pictures of Pope Francis, it's rare that you see him smiling at the end of his ministry as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He's elected to be Pope, and you see this transformation. The Holy Spirit, right, working through our natural gifts, gave him the gifts that he needed for his ministry. And it was a ministry of mercy. I think if you had to sum up the ministry of Pope Francis, we saw the face of God. We saw the merciful face of Jesus in and through the ministry of Pope Francis. And that is to be celebrated, not derided, right? That is a gift. One person described his life as the gospel poured out for us in an extraordinary way. And this gift, to be sure, is integral to our Catholic faith and should not be mocked by some who would mock almost everything that is sacred. So friends, I want to conclude by talking about the Eucharistic elements that call us to self-gift and also are a foreshadowing of heaven. So some of us were on pilgrimage in Belgium, and I see a number of our pilgrims here at Mass this morning. It was a great gift to be there. Belgium is an exquisite and beautiful country. And one of the things that struck me is these magnificent churches that were built in the Middle Ages. They were built in this grand style because this was a foreshadowing of the heavenly liturgy and banquet that we hear described in the second reading from Revelation today. The Cathedral of Ghent, if you've not seen it, is amazing, soaring, and people, immigrants and others, people in poverty, giving what they had because this represented heaven. And in Ghent, there is the adoration of the mystical Lamb, one of the most beautiful paintings in all of European history. And again, it's a foreshadowing of the heavenly liturgy. This is what we have to look forward to, right, as we live our lives of faith. We don't presume it, but we welcome it. This is why, in an audacious act, Archbishop John Ireland chose to build the Cathedral of St. Paul and the Basilica of St. Mary at the same time. Look at this beautiful church, one of the most beautiful churches in the country, and we, with God's help and your generosity and commitment, will restore our beautiful church because it represented heaven. And then finally, what else does the Eucharist call us to? It calls us to a life of agape love. Do you love me? Pour forth your life in service. That's what Jesus is calling you to. I should have said penultimately, what do I hope for our next Pope? I have some characteristics as I've been praying about this and reading quite a bit of the different candidates, and of course nobody knows but the Holy Spirit who it will be later this week, likely. Here are some things that I hope for. That they would be holy, right? A man of prayer, number one. Free, truly free, such that they could be both courageous and prophetic, spiritually free, unattached. That they would be missionary, the idea of going out to preach and to live the gospel, serving those who are poor and in need. Competent, right? That they would be a competent manager of a very vast church, very, very important as well. And then finally, like Pope Francis, like Jesus, like God the Father, merciful and compassionate. Friends, these also are very, very important characteristics of any disciple.